What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Friday, November 8th, 2019. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. And we have got a lot to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, and observations here. Okay, as you are probably already aware, well aware, should be aware, this is Veterans Day weekend. Veterans Day is Monday. If you are a veteran, there are all kinds of special deals going on in various restaurants and stores and Amazon, and you might want to avail yourself of those opportunities here. And we do need to show the proper respect to our veterans, because if you really think about it, they are as much a victim of government lies as the rest of us. And I know it's a very popular idea about, we should take out our anti-war anger on the veterans. I'm sure most of these people enlisted with the very best of intentions. They really believed that they were going to be serving the country and bringing democracy to these other countries. And like Major General Smedley Butler, don't realize until well along that they're really enforcers for the corporate mafia. So we are appalled at what takes place during war, but it really comes from higher up. And so a lot of people find this very odd. I have a great deal of respect for those who've served in uniform. And we owe them a debt of honor. We really do. And that's one of the reasons why I make such a big stink over the way the Veterans Administration is not taking care of our veterans. The money's all going to Israel, to the war machine, to illegal immigrants and refugees, and there's hardly anything left over for the American people, including our veterans. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, obviously, on Monday, which is going to be Veterans Day. And I imagine that the cable TV will be filled with war movies, because war is fun, and we've got to convince young people that war is something they want to get into. Now, Trump will become the first sitting president of the United States to attend the New York City Veterans Day Parade. So I hope he's wearing his Kevlar on that one, because I'm expecting there to be some kind of a false flag to try and reignite the war fever in the American people, to justify going back into Syria. And of course, we have seen amply demonstrated over the last few years how official Washington, bureaucratic Washington, is absolutely dedicated to the removal of Donald Trump. And we're not exactly sure why. One theory is that this is all being driven by Hillary, who is still very bitter over her 2016 loss to Trump. Another theory is it's emerging that all of these people, all of these players were involved in the corruption that was going on during the Obama administration. They're all in this one giant gang together. They're all making money off of it. And they're concerned that, Trump is going to bring the party to an end because he's not part of the gang. But again, for any of Trump's security people who are monitoring this broadcast, drink lots of coffee that morning, be very alert, because there are a lot of people who hate Donald Trump. Now, I'm not a Trump fan. I consider him a tremendous disappointment. But I'm also a supporter of our Constitution, and I demand a government and people in government to play by the rules. Try and game the system. All right, well, it looks like Michael Bloomberg is stepping into the 2020 Democratic presidential race, and he's basically out there saying there's nobody out there right now who could take on Donald Trump. So apparently Bloomberg has dispatched aides to Alabama to file the paperwork to run as a Democrat in the primary, and I guess the deadline was today, and that's why he had to make his decision. but he's apparently seriously planning for a White House run. And that, of course, is going to completely shake up the Democratic Party, because if he steps on in, all of the various candidates' strategists are going to have to sort of retool, deal with Bloomberg. And my understanding is Elizabeth Warren is already out there on the attack against him. Oh, how could you want to vote for Michael Bloomberg? He's a billionaire after all. As I said the other day on the phone, there are some billionaires who are very bad for the people in general, like George Soros is a good example. There are people who become billionaires through very honest means and contributing to our society. And I don't have a problem with them. I don't have a problem with rich people. I'd like to be rich myself. There are just things I will not do to be rich. Alrighty, Jeff Sessions has announced he is going to run for the Senate from Alabama. An interesting election season up there in Alabama. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Speaking of Elizabeth Warren, story coming out of buzzblue.com. Apparently, Elizabeth Warren is working too hard to try and show that she is relatable to too many different disparate groups. And the net result is she's making herself look more fake than even before. All right. Apparently, Fox News management is now forbidding all of their hosts from using the name of the alleged Ukrainian whistleblower, which is reported to be Eric Ciaramella. And so they're out there saying, no, don't use that name. Don't use that name. Facebook is removing all news reporting that mentions Eric Ciaramella. Now, if he wasn't the whistleblower, why would they care? It's almost like they're putting up a flashing neon sign saying, oh my goodness, they found the guy, they found the guy, they found the guy here. And right now the corporate media is in serious trouble because people are noticing what's going on. They're noticing how things have disappeared, how they're being stampeded in a specific direction. And this revelation that ABC News had, but then spiked the Jeff Epstein story years ago, is causing a lot of people to say, what else are they hiding from us? Are they really thinking they're going to run their networks reporting on the sports scores and the weather? They're not that good on the weather. Now, CBS has fired a female staffer who may have leaked the Epstein rant video of that ABC anchor. They don't know that she did. They're just saying, we got to do something. We got to fire somebody. And for you Kafka fans, that's basically it. Oh, we've decided you're guilty. It's politically expedient. You're out of here. The other day I was going on about how frustrating it is where we're hearing all this talk about how the FISA report is coming out, but not yet. The IG report is coming out, but not quite yet. And as it turns out, there are people in Congress who are working to keep these reports hidden from you. And apparently, Democratic Senator Mark Warner, who's the vice chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, is holding up the release of findings of the panel's investigation into allegations of Trump-Russia collusion. It was supposed to have been released in September. And those who've seen it says it fully exonerates Trump. Well, obviously, that's bad news for people who want to keep pushing the Russiagate smear. And it's bad for everybody in the corporate media who jumped on board and reported that story without any corroboration whatsoever. Which underscores their hypocrisy in saying, well, the Jeff Epstein story did not meet our journalistic standards. We couldn't find corroboration for it. Therefore, we decided we were going to sit on the story. Now, they didn't worry about corroboration with the claims about Saddam's nuclear weapons or Assad's sarin gas, did they? So this has nothing to do with journalistic standards, and it has to do with the corporate media management saying, we will decide what the American people are going to know and what they're not going to know. Alrighty, as you know, of Trump's ambassador Yayanovich, who got fired, testified about what he knew about what was going on. He's already been caught in a lie under oath. Now, it's a trivial, minor lie in and of itself, but it basically destroys. He's willing to lie under oath, even over trivial things, and therefore he's already discredited himself as a witness. Now, Bolton has announced he's ready to testify in the impeachment inquiry. This is where he gets back at Donald Trump for firing him. And get up there and I'm going to bury Donald Trump and do to him what he did to me. Now, Megyn Kelly has launched a personal Instagram account, and she launched it with an interview with the woman who was fired after ABC's Amy Robach video leaked. So Megyn Kelly's already tracked down this lady who got fired, and it will be interesting to see what her side of the story is. Apparently, Joy Behar and Tulsi Gabbard mixed it up a little bit on The View, and Gabbard basically just ripped Joy apart. Joy was still pushing that Gabbard is a useful idiot. She's working for Russia. She's going to split the Democratic vote. And Gabbard just tore on into her. It seems to be all that the left can come up with. You're a Russian agent. You're a Russian agent. You're a Russian agent. Now, Tulsi is still out there pushing for the release of documents that she says will link Saudi Arabia to 9/11. And she's on very slippery ground here. I think she's looking in the wrong direction, but it doesn't, in the long run, really matter. Because if those documents do come out and it shows that Saudi Arabia was involved in 9/11, then the American people are going to say, why did we bomb Afghanistan? Why did we go into Iraq? Why aren't we bombing Saudi Arabia if this is all about revenge for 9/11? And again, everybody who was on board with the, 9/11 was all done by Al-Qaeda and those mean, nasty Arabs, they're going to be made to look like utter fools. So go, Tulsi. I don't care that you're pointed, in my opinion, in the wrong direction. At least you're pointed in a direction and you're trying to do something. And I'm very, very grateful for that. Okay, Mark Halperin is out with a new book, How to Beat Trump. In its first week, it sold a grand total of 502 copies. It's not going to make the bestseller list at that rate. At that rate. Over at hideoutnow.com, they have this article about how Hollywood isn't really an influence any longer on the American electorate. And of course, we all remember all those videos Hollywood celebrities made in 2016 where they attempted to schmooze citizens to vote against Donald Trump. They were relying on their star power. Oh my goodness, if Trump wins, I'm going to leave the United States of America, which sadly they did not. And of course, it didn't work. The outcome of the 2016 election proved that Hollywood is politically out of touch with the majority of the American people. And now it looks like Hollywood is even out of step with the majority of Democratic voters. The Los Angeles Times, which is currently facing a backlash for this bizarre story about the Mormon family massacred by the Mexican cartel, has been tracking celebrity donations to 2020 presidential candidates. The results do not look good for Hollywood. According to this report, Hollywood's overwhelming favorite with 70 celebrity donors is Democratic candidate Senator Kamala Harris. Right now, she sits in 5th place in the Democratic primary polling with just 4.3% of the vote. Now, this is interesting. The Tactical Ops Brewery in Fresno, California, is now stamping the bottom of their cans with the message, Epstein didn't kill himself. Talk about putting your money where your mouth is. Of course, most people don't look at the bottom of their beer cans, but still, I think it's significant. I definitely think it's significant. All right, the NSA, which used to mean no such agency, was basically before Congress asking for their spy program to be permanently reauthorized. Now, this spy program, which has them looking at our metadata, possibly recording our phone calls, tracking us everywhere, was implemented in the post 9/11 panic, and it had a sunset clause. It's supposed to go away. So the NSA went before Congress to say, we need this to be permanent. And yet, during the course of the questioning, they were saying, so far, it doesn't work. It hasn't caught a single terrorist. It's gone wrong. It's made more mistakes than anything else. Apparently, the testimony was so bad that senators on the Judiciary Committee were shaking their heads in disbelief. And this is classic federal government. We've got a completely useless program. It's a total waste of money. It's not working. Please make it permanent. Now, we talked about this earlier in the week, but apparently Russia captured intact an advanced Israeli interceptor missile. And let's see, I think it was the David Sling missile, and it's on its way to Russia to be reverse engineered. And of course, Israel is demanding the return of the missile. The U.S. is demanding the return of the missile. It's not going to happen. Finders, keepers, losers, weepers. They may get the missile back eventually in a large crate in pieces, but I don't think so. Now, a lot of people have been looking at Trump's grab for the oil in Syria and say, it's theft, it's piracy, which is what it is. Well, the Pentagon is trying to ameliorate that by saying, well, no, the Syrian oil will not go to the United States. It's going to go to fund the Kurdish Syrian Democratic Forces, which are neither democratic nor Syrian. And this is somehow supposed to make it acceptable. It amounts to the same thing. The U.S. is going into somebody else's country, stealing property that it does not own, and doing with it as it will. Classic CYA here. Alrighty, former British ambassador to Syria is saying that Britain is complicit in Trump's Syria oil grab. And forces being redeployed to Syria's oil-producing areas are inherent resolve forces, and that was the code name for the British part of the coalition. So everybody's hopping on board. Oh, we're all going to go steal the oil. We're going to have so much fun here. Now, yesterday we reported on how an IAEA inspector was stopped from going into one of the Iranian nuclear facilities when detectors around the entryway sounded the alarm that she was carrying something highly radioactive. She refused to allow her briefcase to be searched, which she's not allowed to refuse that. That's part of the P5+1 deal. And then instead she turned around, resigned her position, and left the country. And we saw this happen in Iraq when one of the IAEA inspectors tried to plant highly enriched uranium on an Iraqi facility. And it looks like they were trying to do it again. And apparently Pompeo didn't get word about the embarrassment because Pompeo's out there saying that Iran is preparing a nuclear breakout. And Pompeo is demanding the world powers act against Iran. Force Iran back into compliance with the P5+1 deal. Forgetting, of course, it was the United States that walked out on that deal. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And interesting little story coming out of the Washington Examiner. There's a very clear bias written into it, and it starts right at the headline. At auction, Putin's executive order to take Crimea from Ukraine. And apparently this document is expected to fetch between $8,000 and $10,000, according to Alexander Historical Auctions. Now, the first thing I'm thinking about is, why would such an important historical document be let out for auction by the Russian government anyway? I've got a question mark over that. But basically, they're describing the document as Russian President Vladimir Putin's 2014 decree that cleared the way for the annexation of Crimea from Ukraine. Well, that's not what the actual document says. You know, the document creates a Ministry of Crimean Affairs that was tasked with integrating the economic, financial, credit, and legal systems of Crimea with that of the Russian Federation, following the Crimean referendum that says we don't want to be part of Kiev anymore, we want to go back to being part of Russia. But they're still pushing that Russia stole Crimea, they've got to give it back. Now, here's an interesting story, and it's interesting in that it suggests that the world really is on the edge of a global revolt. Apparently down in Bolivia, a mayor, Patricia Arca, governing Mas Party, was dragged out of Vinfo Town Hall Wednesday, doused with red paint, and had her hair hacked off by a furious mob who blamed her for the deaths of 2 opposition protesters. So we're starting to see violence in the streets. We have been seeing violence in the streets, even in this country, especially with Antifa and Black Lives Matter. But this country has become a powder keg. It's just ready to explode here. Same thing down in Haiti. Nearly a year and a half, protesters in Haiti have been calling on President Jovenel Moïse to step down. Began with dissatisfaction at a fuel shortage, and it's evolved into widespread anger over the rising cost of living and a corrupt elite. Boy, sounds awfully familiar to me. All sectors of Haiti's economy and public services are at a standstill. Demonstrations quite often descend into outright riots. Now, you're going to love this one. Apparently, there was some kind of a military celebration, if you will, that involved rolling out a brand new F-35 jet. And the tradition where this took place was that the airport firefighters would cross 2 streams of water overhead, like cross swords, through which the jet would emerge to be displayed to the audience. Well, one of the firefighters on one of the trucks made a mistake, and instead of shooting water through their cannon, shot the fire suppressant foam. It's often used to deal with burning wreckage on the ground. And they discovered, to everybody's embarrassment, the foam actually damaged the very expensive special coating on the F-35. Apparently, it's very, very fragile. The pilot was also complaining that because of the foam was covering the canopy of the aircraft, that he couldn't see where he was going. A little bit of an oopsie there. I mean, as much as those aircraft cost, you would think they would be a little bit more resilient. But they're like these very, very fine Swiss watches, very expensive, very pretty to look at, but just easy to damage. Okay, apparently this last year, 1 in 4 Americans defaulted on their student loans. Real wages have dropped. The real economy is falling. The corporate media is out there telling you, oh no, everything's fine. Everything's really great. Just look at the stock market and it's all hunky-dory. Meanwhile, we're seeing more indications of literally being a run on the dollar. And the question is this panic or is it greed? And what has forced the Federal Reserve into this ever-escalating repo program is banks are now reluctant to lend to each other. And that signals to me that the banks are concerned. Collapse is imminent. Like in 2008, the big issue is going to be liquidity. So they're hanging on to their available cash and they're not lending. And by the way, that was a big contributor to the crash of 1929. When the market started to go south, short-term credit dried up. Tools that might have reduced the negative effects of the crash of 29 were no longer available. Okay, we're going to take a phone call now from Dan in Washington State. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, thanks for taking the call.
Dan, I'm sorry, I wasn't watching the clock. I got to put you on hold. We've got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back with your phone call. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're going to go back to the phones to Dan in Washington State. Dan, I apologize for having to cut you off earlier. What's on your mind?
That's okay. Thanks for taking the call. Had some good shows lately. People debating between, if we're living in a fascist system or a socialist system. And but I kind of have a different take. It might sound out there, but have you done much research about the Middle Ages and the court Jews, when a king would bring in court Jews to kind of run the kingdom, and they would be the money lenders and the tax collectors? Like if you look at Lord of the Rings, the character Wormtongue is kind of, traditional. And I think the Jungle Book, where you have the king, the Tiger King with the snake kind of going around, that's kind of what those symbolize. But I would
Funny,
argue
I never got that impression
day.
watching those movies. And let's forget what plunged Europe into unpayable debt were the Knights Templar, who were able to evade the Christian ban on usury. Up till the time of the Templars, Christians, like the Muslims, banned usury, considered it a sin. But the Templars were able to get around that. And so, of course, immediately, the debt started piling up to the point where finally King Philip the Fair said, I can't pay this debt. I'm going to have to kill off the bankers.
Yeah, and it seems to go back. There's a lot of those in Poland. There's a book called if you look into Polish medieval history, the royal family would bring in basically money lenders, or you could call them Jews or whatever. I don't see Knight Templar, but I think it's more the Jewish group. But
that's a big part of the Templar history. They created much of what we consider to be modern banking, including travelers' checks and various things like that.
But weren't they all killed, or were? I don't see any Knights Templars around today.
If they had all been killed, I wouldn't be here, because one of my ancestors was a master of the temple in Portugal. Philip the Fair's edict, the Pope's edict, was not carried out in two countries, Portugal and Scotland. And so there are descendants of Templars still around today. There's a modern organization called the Knights Templar, and a lot of people are thinking that the surviving Templars basically formed what is now Switzerland, which is why the splayed cross on the flag of Switzerland is so similar, although not in the heraldic sense identical to the cross of the Knights Templar.
Yeah, I'm going to research more of the Templar history. I didn't know. I just when I look at, if you look at the people who set up the Federal Reserve, like the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, and in a way, I kind of look at them as our kind of king or royalty, and then they bring in a system of court Jews to administer the tax collection.
Let me ask you a question. Okay, if you're the royal family of a country, the money is already under your control. And why would you bring in a group that is going to make their money loaning money to your citizens? Now, back when this was all going down, of course, money was silver and gold coinage. This paper note thing didn't come along until quite a bit later. And so royal houses would have to borrow from the bankers in order to fight their wars. And they got into trouble. Once the Templars were allowed to charge interest on the money they were loaning to the royal families of Europe, the royal families of Europe got into serious trouble.
Yeah, it's kind of like Game of Thrones. Like I envision the Iron Bank kind of thing.
Yes.
But I know moneylender was synonymous with Jewish. Like if you look at the Magna Carta of 1200, it says basically Jew meant moneylender back then. It's kind of interesting how they. But I just thought it's an interesting analogy for me. That's how I envision America. That's our royalty, and they have a court Jew system, running basically for control, because they do already have the money, but they might need more money, so they administer the tax collecting, the propaganda operations, and social control for the royal families.
Well, the reason for the tax system is not revenue generation, because, the government is just, or rather the Federal Reserve is just printing the money out of thin air, and the government is borrowing it at interest and saying, we promise we'll make the future generations of Americans pay that interest back, which is now impossible to do. But yeah, I think Baron Rothschild said it best: give me control of a nation's currency, and I care not who makes the laws.
Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah, I'll research more Knights Templar stuff, but I just wanted to throw that angle in with the, I find that they've erased a lot of that history of the court Jew system, and because it is an actual thing that happened over and over again in the Middle Ages, where the royal family
if I can share a bit of advice here, because I get a lot of these phone calls all the time. Yes, Jews are very good at handling money, and they're often sought out for their financial expertise and their ability to make money. But don't get so focused on them that you miss that there are other players in history who have played that exact same game.
Yeah.
Okay?
Right. I agree. I agree. And, you do have the church, and they've used these kind of, sometimes I wonder if the Jews are just undercover, Vatican people or Templars and pretend to be Jews. I don't know. But I agree. So,
all right. Well,
as far as what we're, thanks.
Thanks for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Just a reminder too: the Rockefellers, the Morgans, the Carnegies, and other predators like that were not Jewish. Okay.
Yes.
The Rothschilds definitely are, but it's a multifaceted. These are multifaceted predators. And that's what brings me back to what I wanted to talk about. Yesterday, I pointed certain things out why I think maybe socialism wouldn't be such a bad thing. First of all, somebody called back later on. I think he's got a talk show himself or something, and said that, well, how am I supposed to conduct my business and this, that. First of all, when I say 95% or 90% tax over $1 million that you make, I'm talking about your net worth. Your net pay. In other words, after your business, if you got a small business or something, or even a large business, after you make $1 million, after you actually net that million, then you pay like 95%, anything over that $1 million. Okay? And up to then you pay maybe 20 or 50% up to your first million. My other thing is, a lot of people were complaining yesterday about, saying, oh, this and that, and why we don't have anything, and they're getting everything, the billionaires, his corporations getting everything. Well, that's not socialism. That's because of a predatory form of capitalism. And don't get me wrong, Mike, I'm not a socialist myself. I haven't gotten there yet. Things keep going that way, I might. But all I'm saying is certain things have to be done. Why for instance, Glass-Steagall, we're paying for this right up to today. Why was that eliminated? It wasn't eliminated because of regular people. It was eliminated because the fat cats wanted it eliminated so they can go do their gambling and basically broke this country. And they're still continuing to break in this country. Glass-Steagall was put in there by FDR for good reason, to prevent another depression, to keep these banksters and these other Wall Street carnivores in line. Not, you know,
Well,
but we go away with it. It's the same thing with all these trade agreements. These were these rich corporations that wanted these trade agreements because they don't care about the people of this country or working men in this country. And then another thing too, I heard people complain about the borders. Well, guess what? First of all, if we wouldn't interfere in countries like Nicaragua and Honduras, those are the majority of people now piled up at the border now. We overthrew their government 10 years ago under Obama, and that's one of the reasons people are so poor today. They had a socialist in it that was actually doing a good job, and we overthrew. And that's also the other thing about the border is this: who wants these illegal aliens really? Who wants them? Cheap labor. Again, the corporations, the rich. That's who wants them in here. It's not so much like the Democratic Party, even though some of the Democratic parties think they get Democratic votes. No, it's these rich, again, it's these rich corporations. They're the ones who want them in, okay? And I see through them, and a lot of other people are seeing through them. And I'll be honest with you, now we got this guy, Bloomberg, running. This is a vicious predator of the first type. When you talk about billionaire predators, this guy is like the poster boy. You know, when you talk about Jack Ruby and the mafia, and you look at his picture, that's the picture of a mafia soldier. A nasty-looking killer, really. And the same thing, when you look at a picture of a billionaire predator, just look at Michael Bloomberg. This man ran the city of New York. He made it into a third world city. We only could survive there if you're rich or poor, middle class, working class. You couldn't survive. You had to move 70, 80, 90, 100 miles away, which, by the way, happened to me. That's what I had to do. Okay? And still take too much. And all the commuting fees on top of it. No, this guy is no good. He is an evil little man. He does not need to be anywhere near the White House. And by the way, I don't think he's going to get anywhere anyway because, already Elizabeth Warren, and I don't like Elizabeth Warren, but on this, I'm very happy she already said we don't need somebody like this in there. And Bernie Sanders already attacked him too. So that's good. I like to see what Tulsi has to say about this creep. Right? This guy, if anything, will probably split the establishment vote, the Democrats, and might actually help people like Tulsi. It's hard to say. He doesn't want to do that. That's not what he's doing. He's an arrogant SOB. He really thinks he can do it. He thinks he can buy his way into the presidency the way he bought himself the mayorship of New York City 3 times. But that's not going to happen. American people are not that stupid yet. And if you go online and look at some of the people like, they call themselves left, but they're really popular. Graham Elwood, Jimmy Dore, Jamari Thomas, let me see, and plenty others. They're not going to go for something like this, Just like they don't go for the silly impeachment thing of Trump. Instead of, if you want to impeach the guy, impeach him for something he's really done, like what he's doing in Syria. But no, they support that, No, I have no use for Bloomberg. He made his money, by the way, dishonestly. He's he's nothing but a hedge fund manager, really. That's how he did it. At least Trump, but don't get me wrong, I don't like what he did either because he mostly, all these stuff he put up with the rich people, the clubs, the casinos, and the expensive apartment buildings. But at least he provided jobs for working class people, okay? Blue-collar working class people and building these houses, these places. So at least he did that. Bloomberg didn't do anything like that. Bloomberg is a parasite. That's all he is. He's a parasite in this country. And by the way, big-time Zionist, okay, big-time globalist, also a draft dodger during the Vietnam War, all right? This guy is as bad as, and yet he's a warmonger at the same time, okay? This guy is as bad as it gets. I'll be honest with you, if it was between him and Hillary, I don't know what I'd do. I mean, that would be some choice. But I believe the reason that Hillary isn't getting in now is because she sees what Tulsi already did to her when she had the nerve to call Tulsi a Russian acid, and how Tulsi tore into her like no other Democrat ever did, And I don't think she wants any part of that. I think she knows what she's in for if she jumps in. So that's opened the way for this turd. And it's a fitting name. I despise this man, Mike. I really do. He is no good. He also had these police state laws like stop and frisk, all right, mostly for young black men. He would just stop them. They would just stop them in the street. And the frisk is supposed to be a search for weapons, okay? Simple. You're supposed to quick pat down, see if somebody has a weapon. So they used to go into the pockets, check for marijuana, do all kinds of other stuff for no reason, okay? Just because they felt like it. That was Bloomberg. Bloomberg and his Gestapo-like police chief, Kelly. You know?
Yep.
So, Mike, believe me, this country does not need somebody like that. I don't know what you think. I'll take you, boy. I'll take it off. I'll let somebody else come on now, but, you know, I'll take your answer out on that, watching you on YouTube there, okay?
Okay. Well, I think we all need to go back to that video that was made when Mitt Romney came to town, which shows his business practices, which is to basically come on in, buy up a company, lay everybody off, sell off the assets, turn a quick profit, and he moves on. And it's certainly good for him personally. He makes a lot of money off of these deals, but it eviscerates a town. But he doesn't really care. So I don't want to see Bloomberg as president either. I don't want to see Hillary as president either. With the possible exception of Tulsi Gabbard, there is nobody out there I want to see in that Oval Office. I would love it if our ballots had a binding none of the above option. You know, where that White House would sit empty for 4 years, or Congress would sit empty for 4 years, or 6 years, or 8 years. And it wouldn't be the first time that it happened. I think it was Belgium went without a central federal government for over a year, and things actually got better for the ordinary people. All righty, so the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. We're talking about the economic news here. Gold has fallen 3% in this week to a one-month low of $1,464 an ounce. And what's going on, banks and hedge funds are selling COMEX futures aggressively. This is how they control the price of gold, so that it's not attractive, so that people will leave their money in their savings accounts and their brokerage accounts, is they play with the paper gold market. And one of the first things that needs to be done to start bringing our economy back to a healthy status is to separate the paper trade from the physical trade. Stop using the paper trade to set the price for the physical market. Okay, we got to take another break for commercials here, and we'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And out in Las Vegas, they have adopted a ban on sleeping or camping on the streets and sidewalks. And for a lot of people whose image of Las Vegas is based on all those commercials for the various resorts, it may come as a surprise. But years ago, when I was still working as an entertainer and I would do Las Vegas on a regular basis, yeah, there's a dark side there. And a lot of people, you like to think that you're going to go on out to Las Vegas and win a lot of money. The vast majority of people lose money, and a lot of them fall victim to a phenomenon called gambler's ruin, where all of a sudden they're completely out of money and they're stuck. So I can understand the problem is probably a lot worse these days, given the economy. But we're seeing a lot of communities all across America adopting the same thing. It is now a crime to sleep or camp on the streets and sidewalks, and that's all well and good. But where are these people supposed to go? Especially with a very, very hard winter coming on down on them, they're really kind of stuck. And to me, you cannot claim that the economy is working when you have this many homeless people out there on the streets of America. The economy's working for the top 1%. It's working for the money junkies. It's feeding their addiction. Ordinary Americans, no. The jobs, Trump has brought a few jobs back to this country, but nowhere near the number that were originally lost. We're seeing a continued push for automation. It's almost like our politicians and our elites are envisioning a world in which there's them, there's nature, and everybody else is gone. And I think probably one of Tom Clancy's most prescient novels was Rainbow Six. I If I recall correctly, it was the last one that he wrote by himself before he started using ghostwriters and co-writers. And it may actually be on its way to happening here. Okay, we've had callers call into the show talking about the refugee illegal immigrant problem, and they throw a whole bunch of numbers around how many people coming on in. But apparently, according to this story over at stationgossip.com, somebody actually has done a study, and the number that they came up with is about 500,000 foreigners entered the United States illegally in fiscal year 2019. That's a lot. That's a lot when you have so many legal American citizens sleeping in alleys and eating out of trash bins. Anyway, House Democrats voted to enhance border security for Jordan, Tunisia, Lebanon, and Egypt, but not the USA. Still opposed to any funding that would fortify that wall with Mexico. We've got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're talking about the immigration problem here. And Bernie Sanders is now changing his tune. Apparently, he's saying now he wants to dismantle immigration and customs enforcement, end the Border Patrol, and admit more refugees. Well, Bernie, that's not going to gain you very much support except from the illegal immigrants and the refugees here. Speaking of homelessness, apparently a side effect of all those California wildfires, it's made their homeless crisis even worse because apparently a lot of homeless people had built camps in those forested areas. And of course, now they're all destroyed and they're back out on the streets down in the urban areas. We had the same thing down on Oahu. We've got about an estimated 8,000 homeless there. And yes, a lot of them are camped out in the tourist areas, much to the annoyance of the Tourism Bureau. But a lot of them have basically built their own little camps up in these watershed areas, like the Helemanu Mountains. And it's very dangerous. People don't even go up there to try and do a head count anymore. So, yeah, it's bad times in this country. No, getting around that here a little bit. Okay, apparently there was this man who was throwing concrete chunks and metal pipes at cars on the freeway, and a driver who was carrying concealed basically drew a gun on this guy to make him stop. And one victim said the gun owner saved her. Another reason to allow the citizens to be armed, because the cops weren't around. Cops didn't show up till much later. Okay, apparently the peace scene is just getting totally bizarre out there. Apparently, college students reported a professor to school officials for allowing students to say that only women can have abortions. That's the latest thing from the transgender community. Oh, yes, men have periods too. Men can have abortions too. Right out of Monty Python and the Life of Brian. And when Monty Python did it, we all recognized how ridiculous the whole thing was. And now we're being asked to kind of take that seriously. And I'm not going to. It is silly. Meanwhile, over in Ireland, an academic is calling for the term Anglo-Saxon to be dropped from modern speech because it has links with white supremacists. So, Anglo-Saxon traditionally refers to groups from Germany, Denmark, and the Netherlands who settled in Britain at the end of Roman rule. But apparently, medieval England specialist Mary Rambaran Olm, an independent scholar and author, claimed the term is used by white supremacists to refer to British white people and should be banned. They want to completely change the language around. It's like 1984, Newspeak. If you don't have a word to describe an idea, then you can't have the idea. That was the guiding principle behind the development of Newspeak here. As I mentioned at the top of the show, Monday is Veterans Day. And one of the long-standing traditions for Veterans Day is the poppy. Little paper, red and poppy, black center. It's sold by veterans to raise money for their various charities. And no big deal. The reason it's colored that way is because most poppies are red with a black center. And the reason the poppy was chosen to symbolize the veterans is because of the link to opium poppies, the eternal sleep. That's where it comes from. Well, this year, apparently, the LGBTQ people have decided to hijack that symbol. And they've started putting out these rainbow poppies. So this prompted a 11th grade student to come on out and say, there's a reason the poppies are red and black. It's got nothing to do with gender. It's got nothing to do with being trans or whatever. And they still kicked him out of school. And, you know, when you consider how the liberal clique, if you will, is always talking about tolerance, then you turn around and see how intolerant they are of anybody who doesn't agree with them. Now, I haven't actually encountered anybody selling the Veterans Day poppies. Imagine I will sometime over the weekend. I wouldn't put on the rainbow poppy. The symbolism is all messed up. People wear those poppies for a specific reason to send a specific message. The LGBTQ people want that to go away. It's getting in the way of our message. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network here. Okay, over in London, there's an Extinction Rebellion fanatic bought himself a 750,000-pound suburban London home and turned it into a climate shrine, including a 12-foot robot made of plastic bottles, multicolored roof tiles, and a broken refrigerator used as a letterbox. And the neighbors around him are absolutely appalled at what a horrific place. It was a wonderful, wonderful home, and now it just looks like this hideous nightmare. They're not happy about that at all. Now, this one got a lot of coverage here. Parents Magazine highlighted this photo of a 4-year-old boy holding a sign that reads, "Some men have periods too. If I can get it, so can you." And it prompted this huge backlash from the readers. You know, so this idea of trying to sell children on the idea that women aren't the only people who menstruate, it's absurd. It's really silly. Like I said, it's like that scene out of Life of Brian by Monty Python. You know, I want to be a woman. I want to have babies. The guy says, you don't have a womb. Where's it going to gestate? First guy breaks into tears. I say, all right. In theory, yes, you can be a woman, and in theory, you can have babies. Now, this story is coming to us from Natural News. And apparently the Austin Independent School District in Texas has voted to implement a new pro-LGBTQP program that includes teaching third graders how to have anal sex. And they did this in the name of inclusiveness, thinking that the most inclusive path forward was to confuse children as young as 8 into believing that male-female biology is oppressive. These kids are being told they can pick whatever gender they want to be, stick their reproductive organs wherever it feels good. It's just absurd. Another article, this one coming from Russia Today. The claims being put on out there that pedophiles are born, not made, which I don't disagree with. You know, there's some bad wiring up there. This is setting the stage, declaring child molestation as just another sexual orientation. And it's going to give the sexual predators more rights than the victims have. Now, again, whatever goes on between two consenting adults, I don't care what you're doing. Two consenting adults, household appliances, barnyard livestock, I don't care. When children are involved, there have to be limits. And nobody's ever going to convince me that children are not deserving of being protected from sexual predation. Because it's not just about the sex, it's about their innocence. It's about their youth, their childhood, because once you take that away from them, it's gone forever. They don't get to go back to being kids. And I think kids ought to be allowed to be kids for just as long as possible. When they become adults, they can make up their own mind about things. Whatever choices they make then, fine. But this concerted effort by the LGBTQP community, I don't even know what the P means, to literally try and enforce this on young people, I think it's child abuse. By the way, that case down in Texas where a custody hearing, and originally the judge awarded custody to this boy's non-biological mother, who had already said that she was going to force him to be a girl, send him for hormone treatments, then later on reversed and said joint custody, and the biological father gets to have a veto over these kind of things. Well, apparently the young boy in question has already come out and said, he's a boy. He feels like he's a boy. He wants to be a boy. And now the non-biological mother is screaming, demanding the judge recuse herself. She didn't get the result that she wanted. And by the way, when they talk about puberty blockers in these kids, these are the same medicines used to chemically castrate sex offenders. And they want to just give them to little kids just to be fashionable. To me, that is child abuse. All right, we're going to go to the phones. Joe in Tennessee. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, this family that got shot up there in Mexico, I'm kind of curious. They're Mormons, and they're related to Romney. I guess his father was a Mexican and an American citizen. There's a whole colony, I guess, of Mormons in that area of Mexico. And I'm just wondering...
Yeah, they went down there to escape the U.S. ban on polygamy.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's, I wondered how the Mexicans feel about them, I wonder if they've kind of assimilated into Mexican culture. We always talk about, people coming across our border and whether or not they assimilate into American culture. And I'm just curious, because, it just seems so very simplistic, like bad drug cartel kills, wholesome white, Mormon family. And I'm wondering if there's more going on here than meets the eye. I was thinking today
there may be because apparently a relative of the family that got killed let slip the fact that there had been a disagreement with this cartel regarding smuggling routes. And the Mormons apparently are involved in drug trafficking.
Yeah, and I'm also wondering if this could be a deep state message to Romney. Because Romney is might be thinking about coming off the reservation or keep him on the reservation, or I'm just because there was a direct blood relatives of Romney, and it wouldn't I wouldn't put it past the deep state because they have a lot of connections to the cartels themselves, and also one thing about the Mormons is they're very into the intelligence communities, and
Yes.
They use their missionaries as an arm of the CIA and the Mormon Church. I guess like the Catholics and the Jesuits do, but
Yeah.
I used to go to Thailand a lot, and the Thais really didn't like them because they were very they just once again when you go to a place, sometimes when you go to other countries, you have to kind of adopt some of their culture, and at least show respect for it. And when you go there and you just you show up with your white shirt and your black pants and your black tie. I always looked at them like, what are you doing here? Why don't you just, go back to Utah or wherever you came from? Not that anybody deserves to get shot down like in Mexico, but I really would like to, find somebody, if you have a listener who's been down in that area, that can clue us into a lot more of what's like simmering beneath the surface of this story, because I bet you there's a lot of like really interesting things going on down there, and I just you're not going to get that really anywhere else except in the news these days, because people have too many agendas, so they're not going to tell you the truth of the matter. On the right they're going to want to it's the drug traffickers and the Mexicans, and on the left it's those rotten white Mormons, and so I wish that somebody with some knowledge really gets more information about this. Really, is what I'm looking for. It's all heartstring stuff and just bad cartel and good Mormon, and I think there's a lot more going on to this story. That's kind of
there probably is here, and one of the reasons I think there's more going on here is because drug cartels don't have a long history of killing people who are not a threat to their drug trade. And so I tend to go with this idea that Mormon drug traffickers were starting to cut in on the action, and that this was more a message to other Mormons to just basically stay out of Mexico's backyard.
Yeah, one other thing, that sounds like a very viable idea. And I just feel like there's something more to this story. It's shameful that it was just women, women and children. I think there's some, that whole part of it's pretty rotten. That if you're gonna go after people, at least go after men. That's kind of always been my attitude about this.
Yes.
The other thing I wanted to mention was, I hear all these people celebrating the 30th year of the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Yes.
And I got to tell you, I mean, if I'm a guy in East Berlin and I'm sitting there watching my neighborhoods being overrun by immigrants and Muslims, and watching the daughters being raped or the people being brutalized, you have to wonder, like, how happy are you that the Berlin Wall did fall? I mean, when you look at what's happening to Europe by the globalists in places like, the old Europe, the eastern side of the Berlin Wall and the Iron Curtain, they've all fallen now to the invasion of the immigrants, whether they're from Africa or the Middle East. And a lot of the countries that are standing up against this invasion are like Poland and Romania and all these countries that are still have a backbone as far as nationalism and maintaining their genetics as white Europeans. They're all on the eastern side of the Iron Curtain. And something has to be said for that. I mean, we sit there and celebrate like, oh, isn't it great? They became part of the EU in the West, and look what they got for it. I mean, culturally, are they really better off? You have to ask yourself, yeah, they might have more material things, and so-called freedom, but really, do you in Germany? Can you criticize Israel over there without being put in jail? Can you criticize migrants over there without being put in jail? Can you criticize gays over there now without being put in jail? How free are they now? All they got are high-tech gadgets, which are sterilizing them and and things like that. But meanwhile, you have to wonder, was it, all this cheering and how great, banging our chest about how great it was it really good for them? That's the question I think people should be asking. But they won't.
Well, certainly, I can't say anything about what's going on in East Germany, East Berlin, because when I worked in Germany, the Berlin Wall was still standing. But pretty much everybody I talked to in the part of Germany where I was working, which was around Munich, they all said it would be a good thing for that wall to come on down. Anyway, listen, we got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We got more callers waiting on the line, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones to Steve Elkins. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I have to clear the air on something here because I have a lot of experience in it. I lived in Utah for 10 years. I dealt with the Mormon tradition, the Mormon culture quite a bit in 10 years. And I just want to emphasize something that the media is getting this all wrong. And I just want to clarify it and correct it. These people that were slaughtered, that were killed in Mexico were not Mormons, okay? They are a splinter group of the Mormons. They're actually the reorganized Church of Latter-day Saints. The Mormon Church in Salt Lake City does not recognize them. And I just want to just clear the air on that because everybody keeps saying the Mormons. They're actually not Mormons. They are a splinter group of the Mormon group who decided to keep the tradition of polygamy, yes, among other traditions that the Book of Mormon actually stated was okay. And I just want to clear the air because everybody calls the Mormons Mormons, and they're really not the Mormons. They are a splinter group. They're the reorganized Church of Latter-day Saints. So that's about all I got to say on that. And I think you're right. Possibly they were a threat to the drug lords down there, and if they're a threat, they were taken out because of that. That's about all I got to say on it. I just want to clear the air on that. Mormons versus the reorganized Church of Latter-day Saints, and they're not Mormons.
Well, I mean, we have the same thing among various Christians where there are different denominations, like the Branch Davidians, for example. And it's too easy to start to generalize and paint with that wide paintbrush, and we do need to be very, very careful about that. But again, if you look at the history of the drug cartels, they don't just kill people off for being a different religion. And I can't imagine a drug lord getting really upset over the fact that these people are practicing polygamy. I tend to go with this accidental admission that there was some smuggling routes under dispute.
Yeah, possibly. That's it for me, Mike. Have a great show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Terry in California. Aloha, Terry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I don't get to listen to your show every day, but did you mention what happened to Max Blumenthal when he was arrested?
We mentioned it yesterday, but why don't you go ahead and fill our listeners in?
Well, I don't know. The only thing I know is, he finished his third book on Israel, which was the 51-day war where the Israelis attacked Gaza. And there's pretty graphic things, I understand, in that book. And then he had some of those pieces about Venezuela, and then he was arrested and taken in, not given his rights, and kept for 33 hours without charges, and then finally released. But do you know what jurisdiction? Was that the federal government that arrested him, or was that a local government?
I think it was federal jurisdiction, and supposedly he was arrested for something that supposedly happened like 3 or 4 years ago. But in essence, he was arrested for thought crime.
Well, yeah, but that book just came out too. The third one on Israel. That, and the thing about Venezuela, that wasn't that long ago. I
think it may have been the Venezuela article, because the U.S. is still trying to figure a way to get Guaido into rulership there.
Right. I think he's suing whoever it was that arrested him. I don't know how far he's going to get with that. But anyway, he's done some good work, and I really appreciate the guy,
Yes.
And I just want to clarify something else. This morning you mentioned something about there was a woman from the IAEA. She was an inspector, and she was trying to smuggle some radioactivity, some radioactive material into the area that Iran was enriching their uranium. Is that right?
Well, that's the theory. We don't know exactly what happened, other than that she showed up with the rest of the IAEA inspectors, and when she went to enter the area, the radiation detectors around the doorway went off. And the Iranians said, can we have a look inside, you know, your briefcase and whatever, to see what set off the radiation meters? And she refused, which under the terms of the P5+1 she's not allowed to do. So she simply turned around, resigned her position, and left Iran. And the idea, especially when you look at Mike Pompeo is out there saying that Iran is about to achieve a major nuclear breakthrough and we've got to stop them now, blah, 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 blah. I think they wanted to try and plant something incriminating in the Iranian facility to be discovered at a later date. And again, they tried the same thing with Iraq, and they got caught doing it. And it was so tense back then that they demanded a sample, that a reference sample that was sent along may have been used to try and carry out the contamination. And rather than turn the materials over for investigation, the delegation simply burned it all.
Well, if they don't want them enriching uranium, get back in the P5+1 deal.
Well, exactly. We'll talk about that when we come back from these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And so to recap on what's going on over in Iran, apparently earlier this week there was an IAEA delegation, inspectors, that were making the usual visit to one of Iran's facilities. And apparently while walking through the doorway into the facility, the alarms went off. They detected something highly radioactive. And they were asking this one IAEA inspector, we'd like to look inside your little briefcase, your box, whatever it is they were carrying. And the inspector refused, resigned their position, and left Iran. And the implication is that this was an attempt to plant highly enriched uranium in this facility to be discovered at a later date in order to build the case that Iran was back to pursuing nuclear weapons. And again, they tried the same thing in Iraq, and they got caught at it. And they're making a big deal about Iran being forced to return to the conditions of the P5+1. Iran was following the conditions of the P5+1. It is the United States that unilaterally walked out of the P5+1 agreement and reimposed the sanctions, which was the U.S. commitment to the P5+1 agreement. So basically what's going on here is the U.S. walks away from the agreement and then says, you know, how dare Iran not abide by that agreement that we're not abiding by. That's really what it comes down to. Okay, let's go back to the phones. Mo in Florida. Aloha, Mo. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
Hey, I'm very proud of myself. I remembered the phone number without looking it up.
Okay.
I'm very proud of that, Mike. Anyways, I just I've noticed something kind of I don't know if it's just me. I know it's not just me, but you're aware of this whole Tulsi Gabbard thing about the 9/11 investigation and her, you know, pursuing the Saudi connection.
Yes.
And, you know, I'm noticing the comments where I used to be like, I was the only one saying, how did those Arabs plant those bombs? How did they have access to those buildings, including Solomon Building, the 47-story, you know, building next to the World Trade Center? How did the Arabs have access to that? And nobody had ever commented. Now I'm just reading a lot of comments where people are saying, how did they plant those bombs in there? How did they have access? Do you think that Tulsi Gabbard, if she doesn't know this, then she's an idiot, which I don't think she's an idiot. Do you think she is bringing this whole Saudi thing up to then when the investigation proceeds, if it ever does, and they open documents, if they're ever clear enough to, show all the documents, that she knows this will come out, that the Mossad with the neocons were the planners of 9/11, the PNAC whole thing of the New Pearl Harbor. Do you think she knows this, but do you think that she wants this to come out, or what do you think?
Well, I get the sense that Tulsi, like most Americans, is suspicious of the official story. I don't think she's done enough homework to really say. She knows politically she can't implicate Israel. But again, as I said, to me, it doesn't really matter. Because if any part of the official 9/11 story falls apart, then it all falls apart. And if she wants to implicate the Saudis, if there are in fact documents that implicate the Saudis may have been assisting Israel and the United States in 9/11, but it doesn't really matter because the perception is going to be, oh my goodness, we got lied to again. The U.S. used 9/11 to destroy Afghanistan, to destroy Iraq, to basically launch this century of unending war against the rest of the globe. 9/11 here, 9/11 here. Oops, we were wrong. These people did 9/11. We got to go attack them now. And so if Tulsi makes any headway on this at all, regardless of the direction, I see it as a good thing.
Yeah, because it's exposing once again how we've been lied to. Yeah, it's kind of what I was thinking. I think though that anybody that it's hard to believe that anybody can't realize that, or just it's so obvious to see that there's no way Al Qaeda went weeks or months in advance and pre-wired all those buildings to implode. I mean, that's beyond ignorance, you know? I mean, if she doesn't know that, she's an idiot. I mean, that's all I can say. I mean, you know, all you got to do is do a little cursory research, right? So,
yep.
I don't know, Mike. I don't know. I think she knows, and I don't know. I really honestly don't know. But you're right. She can't know. You can't say Israel. You can't say Mossad. And I know the Saudis, that was part of their plan to take care of their enemies, the Shiites.
Yes.
And their domination over that area. The Saudis had a role, definitely. One question I did ask, was curious about, Mike. Why didn't the Saudis get out of there well before the bombings on 9/11, or the explosions and the destruction of the Trade Center and the other buildings? Why did they hang around there and have to have a special permission to leave the United States? That would almost seem that they didn't know, Bin Laden's family. That's part I don't get. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, that would be the implication for me, is to, because right from the start, a lot of people were saying, well, Saudi Arabia may have had a hand in this, and they wanted to get the Saudis out of there so that the press wouldn't talk to them. But the big question, though, then, of course, would be, why would Saudi Arabia do 9/11? Given the close financial military relationship with the United States, what does Saudi Arabia gain by taking out the World Trade Center? And the answer is nothing. But you have the U.S. government, which is trying to galvanize public support for more war. And, of course, you have Israel, which loves to pull off dirty tricks, blow things up, and then blame a third party for them.
Yeah, I think obviously the Saudis... the United States would take out their enemies, in that area, and they're looking for that control, that regional control. So,
yes.
But if they had any knowledge whatsoever of this thing, which had to be planned months in advance, at least months in advance, why would they still be hanging around and have to be flown out last minute? It doesn't make any sense to me. So,
yeah, it's a good question.
That's what I'm saying, right?
They literally waived. Because right after 9/11, all the aircraft were grounded and people were stranded at airports all across the country to sort of spread the psychic shock from coast to coast. And but yeah, the Saudis got a special exemption and they were allowed to leave the country.
But why would they? If they had any involvement, they would have been gone long before the event. That's all I'm saying. So maybe they I don't know. I really honestly don't know, Mike. So, I throw it at you because, it's kind of a puzzler. It wouldn't make any sense whatsoever because that took a lot of advanced planning, the new Pearl Harbor. So I just throw that out there, Mike. Thank you so much, and I'll listen to the rest of the show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go and switch over to Ray in Indiana. Aloha, Ray. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Well, welcome to Who's Your Winner here. You get a little taste of winter here after being in Hawaii all those years.
Yes, it's taking a little getting used to.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. I had a suggestion for your opening greeting. How about aloha, you all? You got a little Hoosier flair to it.
Aloha, y'all. I think y'all is a little
aloha,
further south
you
than
all.
where I am right now. I was thinking about doing Who's Your Daddy?
Yeah, but then a while back, people were giving suggestions on where to visit. One that they didn't mention that I'd like to add to your list, and it's more of a day trip because it's over Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Has the Air Force Museum. It's free, and it's just across the Ohio line. So it'd be a day trip from where you're at, but it's definitely worth the trip because you'll spend several hours there. You'll spend you can easily spend 8-10 hours there, all the different displays they got. And it's totally free. It's one of my favorite museums.
Well, we're still in the process of finishing moving in, and that's what I'm dedicating this weekend to. And then once we get all of that done and get all this other stuff caught up and all the paperwork caught up and everything, then I'll finally be able to take a deep breath and actually say, let's see what's around here. And definitely Wright-Patterson is on the list. But we're way down in the southern part of Indiana. We're just a short distance from the Kentucky border. And so it will be a bit of a drive for us. I'm toying with the idea of trying to catch the Indianapolis 500 live because I like cars. What can I tell you? I like cars. But again, I'm enjoying the local geology. I'm enjoying the local wildlife. People around here, very pleasant. They say good morning to you, even though you're a total stranger. I haven't met a single nasty person anywhere around here. I understand in Indianapolis and the western side of Evansville are very rough places, but where I am right now, it's almost bucolic how calm it is here.
Yeah, you definitely got a real taste of Hoosier hospitality, and I'm glad to hear that. That is that what you're reporting there is not unusual. That is very that's very common for Indiana, is what I'm saying. Hoosier hospitality is a real thing. And anyway,
right around here, around here, it is as pleasant and polite and calm as Hawaii was when we first moved there over 20 years ago. But over the last 20 years, especially the last 10, as Oahu is loaded up with people, it's become more urban. People are driving fast, they're driving reckless, and it's urban blight settled on in. And, I miss the islands themselves. I miss the scenery. I certainly miss the half-naked hula girls, which you don't see a lot of here in southern Indiana. And but otherwise, Indiana is working out to be a very pleasant place.
All right. Well, thanks again. Keep up the great work, and I look forward to your show each and every day. Take care.
Thank you very much for the kind words. We're going to let you go and switch to James in Tokyo. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, you got to come up with a new expression. You always say, hey, welcome to Halloween on Fridays. And now you need a new expression now that you're in Indiana.
Well, I'm looking for a possible change, but I actually got a lot of email from people saying we're used to the Aloha America, and your physical location really doesn't matter in the age of the internet.
Oh, well, anyway, I always liked when you say that. I guess I'm a little sentimental, so anyway, if you come up with a new expression, I'll be very happy. Hey, don't be so stressed out about teaching the anal sex in school, because I just read they just stopped that because it led to a high level of violence.
Good.
All the kids are going up to the other kids and saying, "I'm going to beat your ass." So they stopped teaching that in the program. Anyway, I want to talk about the Mexico thing quickly. I believe that it's all related. The Nexum, the Epstein, what went down in Mexico, it's all related to child trafficking, drug trafficking. This cult in Mexico, they were basically trying to take over Mexico. They had the president of Mexico's son, Salinas, as a member of that group. And as a result, there was a big power struggle with the cartel. And that's kind of why the job, the hit job went down. And they were taking girls, and they were from their cult, and they were sending them up north to be, sex slaves, and also involved with blackmail and stuff like that. So, these people were playing a bad game, and they got caught in the middle of it, and unfortunately, they got killed. But I think it's something that the Mexican government themselves should try and handle themselves, and not Donald Trump.
Well, again, we don't have all the details, and it does seem like there are forces within our corporate media and our government who want the story to kind of go away. And
and also, you had a caller. He talked about Germany. A friend of mine who lived in Tokyo for a long time. She's a German girl. She moved back to West Germany, but she recently came here to visit. She was telling me that she's from Berlin, and she actually moved to the East Germany part of, where the wall used to be, I guess. And because, number one, the real estate is a lot cheaper, so she ended up buying herself an apartment. And number two, the East Germans, they won't take all the violence and all the, and the muggings and all the stuff from the migrants. But they're a different kind of people than the West Germans. And she says that she's just very, very happy. But she goes, into West Germany, what's West Germany now, goes there to work, and then she's very happy being in East Germany, although it's not as exciting or anything. People are a little more conservative there, but it's a safer place to be.
Yeah, well, like I said, the last time I was in Germany was before the fall of the Berlin Wall, so my experiences there are pretty much outdated at this point.
How long were you there for?
Oh, must have been about 4 or 5 months.
Oh, nice. Anyway, that's all I had to say, Mike, and I wish you and Claire a great weekend in Indiana.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And let's see. Getting on back to the world of political correctness, we have been seeing this trend in the entertainment industry where they're taking old established classics and they're remaking them to be politically correct. All right, we've got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones here to David in California. Aloha, David. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I was just thinking, I think if you wanted to once in a while say, like you always say, keep aloha, America, that's great. And who's your daddy? right in a row, Anyway,
well, the reason I didn't go with who's your daddy is, as it turns out, there are several bars and several local bands who are already using that name, and I don't want to step on anybody's toes.
Gotcha. All right, I like aloha. Thanks a lot, Mike. See you later.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. All right, so we're talking about this trend in this politically correct world to take established classics, if you will, and retool them to be politically correct. And one good example, of course, would be The Day the Earth Stood Still. The original, which starred Michael Rene and was directed by Robert Wise, was basically a response to nuclear proliferation. Then, of course, there was the remake with Keanu Reeves that was all about environmentalism and how humans have to be destroyed to save the planet Earth. Commercially, these films don't do well. That was illustrated by the feminized Ghostbusters, which had an excellent cast of comedians. They basically made most of the script was from the very first original Ghostbusters, but people just, they didn't respond to it. They didn't look at it. They already knew the story, and just because it was women up there didn't make it any more attractive. And so now the latest one they're doing is apparently BBC is putting out a new version of the War of the Worlds. And it's the new woke version. It trashes religion, the idea of nationalism, and has a lot of climate change rhetoric, as well as creating a female lead for what was a peripheral character in the original novel. So apparently Poldark star Eleanor Tomlinson playing Amy not only gets a much inflated part, but she gets to read the classic introduction that was originally written for one of the two main male characters. And over the years in different movies, that introduction has been read by Orson Welles, Richard Burton, and Morgan Freeman. And Tomlinson apparently said, you know, it's time for a woman to do it. I mean, come on. If you want to make this work, if you want more women in film, then you have to start coming up with original ideas, original content, written for women. Then people will respond. Not right now. Okay, let's see. Let's do that. Got another scam phone call on my cell phone. I get more scammers than anything else. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And getting on back to the news here. Let's talk a little bit about computers here. There is a new protocol coming along called DNS over HTTPS, and eventually all the major browsers will support this. And the idea is that when you're browsing a website, that rather than go to the ISP's DNS to find out where to go, when deployed inside a browser, it allows the browser to hide DNS requests and responses inside regular-looking HTTPS traffic. Now, doing this makes a user's DNS traffic invisible to third-party network observers, such as ISPs. And users love it. They love the increase in privacy. Of course, ISPs and network operators and cybersecurity vendors hate it. See, it's another one of these ironies. The cybersecurity companies, they want there to be cybercrime. They want there to be hackers. They want there to be scammers, because that's what encourages you to buy more of their product. Anyway, Russia has announced they're going to set up their own equivalent of Wikipedia. And they say it'll be fully online and probably larger than the existing Wikipedia by 2023. And they say the reason it's going to be different is there will be no censorship. And they just want to make sure that Russians and whoever else that accesses the site has access to more detailed and reliable information. Apparently, part of the problem is that Wikipedia, the existing Wikipedia, is blocking information that shows Russia in a good light. I mean, the American social media giants, whether it's Wikipedia or Facebook or YouTube or Google, they've become gatekeepers. They are as compromised and in service to the propagandists as ABC, CBS, NBC, so forth and so on. And right now, people who are out here on the internet, we're looking for a way to communicate with each other that doesn't have to go through that filtering. And there's a lot of different ideas out there floating around. A lot of people are talking about bringing back FidoNet. But I think a lot of people are very resentful. They made the time and money and work investment into setting up, be able to use the independent media, to be able to use the internet, and now they find the government using our tax dollars to basically slam the gate shut and say, no, 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 no. This is what you will think. This is what you'll believe. All right, turning to the medical establishment. According to Hugh Fundenberg, MD, there was a study done recently that showed people who have more of the flu shots, the annual flu shot, like the one this year that they were already admitting is totally ineffective, the more of those flu shots you have, the more likely you are to come down with Alzheimer's disease. And it has to do with the fact that modern vaccines still contain mercury and aluminum, and as they build up in the brain, it leads to cognitive dysfunction. Alrighty, on Monday, Mercury is going to transit the sun, and this only happens 13 times a century. Last time it happened, I was still living in Hawaii. And a word of caution, do not look at the sun directly. You'll damage your eyes. Either use a certified solar filter on whatever optics you have, or you can use a technique that's called solar projection, which is where you have a small telescope. You don't need a big one for this. And you point it at the sun, and down on the ground, the eyepiece will project an image of the sun. You'll have to focus it in. And you'll be able to see this little tiny dot transiting the sun. And of course, it's something I'm sure science teachers all across the country are going to be doing. So there we are. Alrighty, David Attenborough, who enjoys a sterling reputation as a modern video naturalist, got caught in a whoopsie, and he did an Our Planet episode in which walruses were seen throwing themselves off cliffs onto rocks, basically committing suicide. And he said it's because their habitat was decimated by climate change. Well, the story was untrue. Now, walruses regularly take to the water as part of their seasonal migration, and some plummet to their doom in their hurry to escape predators like polar bears. Sometimes hunt walruses by triggering a stampede off a cliff, much as the way ancient man used to hunt the mammoth by scaring them off the edge of a cliff. And viewers of the program showed that these walruses were being threatened by polar bears, and because of where Attenborough's camera crew was positioned, they didn't have any place else they could go. Now, supposedly, Attenborough has already revised this episode, but again, it shows that, yeah, even he is caught up in this whole global warming thing. And yeah, it's been in other episodes as well. This winter, I'm hoping, is going to convince a lot of people that global warming, human-caused global warming, is no more real than Saddam's nuclear weapons. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And in another reminder that the goal of PC is to basically destroy our culture, there are now calls to cancel Thanksgiving. All of the excess cooking and eating and feasting and belching is contributing to greenhouse gases. It really is off the top here. All right, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And I saw this story out before and I wasn't sure about it, but supposedly the military rolled out tanks in Queens to basically surround a house and confiscate a bunch of guns. It's one of those things where it seems like, I don't know, I think somebody misinterpreted what was going on. We know that the Democrats want to find a way to confiscate guns, but they can't do it without first convincing the majority of the American people that gun confiscation is a good thing. And they're not getting that. They're not getting the traction. And all these fake mass shootings and everything have not really changed very many people's minds. You know, recruiting young children to be the spokesman of the gun grabbers, that's not working either. Americans are not the naive, gullible people that we were back in the 1950s and 1960s. Apparently, investigators have already found evidence of election fraud in the I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Too many things to look at here. Apparently, investigators looking into the election results in Kentucky, where the Democratic challenger won by a razor-thin margin, the Republican incumbent refuses to concede and is calling for a recanvassing. But there were allegations of irregularities during that election, and apparently investigators have actually found something, according to InfoWars. And again, Trump had 3.5 years to clean up the election system. And he failed to do so. He's probably going to lose next year. I mean, they're already cheating. They're already out there cheating. Apparently, TPUSA loaded up a Q&A session at Representative Dan Crenshaw's Prove Me Wrong event, sent it a bunch of shills, if you were, to ask loaded questions to try and get him to say something embarrassing. Politics is indeed a very, very dirty business here. Randy Zuckerberg is out there saying eating insects may be the next big trend in gourmet, sustainable food. And I'm sure the majority of people are going to be saying, ooh, yuck. But if you follow various travel shows, and I'm a big fan of Expedition Unknown with Josh Gates, and when he goes to visit these other countries, he'll stop and he'll have some of their local cuisine. And you'd be amazed about how many other countries bugs are a regular part of the diet. And they are nutritious. My aunt, when I was a kid, had this store where she could buy chocolate-covered ants, and she'd eat those as a treat. So that may in fact be a viable source of food as we're coming into this food shortage here. It's just going to take people getting used to the idea. All right, one of our members put up a story here from the Associated Press. The Mormon Church is now being forced to confront its history of polygamy after 9 women and children massacred. But as Steve Elkins pointed out, this particular group that is still practicing polygamy is a splinter group that broke off over this very issue. Now, the Mormons who are living up in Utah right now, for the most part, they don't practice polygamy anymore. And again, it's part of their history. And the Mormons are hardly the only culture that allow polygamy, at least among the elites. Chinese emperors would always have, one empress, and then a secondary consort, and a whole bunch of other girls hanging around. Saudi Arabia right now is trying to bully the ultra-rich into buying Aramco stock. Analysts are saying this is not really likely to turn Saudi Arabia's economic problems around. Saudi Arabia was unintended damage from the U.S. attempt to drive oil prices down to harm Russia. And it turned out Russia's economy was a lot more resilient than thought, but a lot of other people suffered ancillary damage, including Saudi Arabia, which had to issue government bonds for like the first time in half a century. Canada got hit. Shale oil got hit. We have a government that follows through on these policies that sound good at the time without a real careful analysis about, what's going to be the fallout, who else is going to get hurt, or maybe analysts are providing the information and it's simply being ignored. We've got to get those Russians, and yes, other people will be hurt, but it's a sacrifice I am willing to make. Back in 1975, the last year for which accurate figures are available, there were 400 journalists and editors under the CIA payroll. It's called Operation Mockingbird. It started at the end of World War II and continues to this very day. Alrighty, Facebook Communications has now admitted that 100 developers had access to user data. Supposed to be able to get at, but they had it. They're still trying to assess how much real damage was done. Mark Levin is out there saying that the whistleblower law does not apply to the president on a phone call. Whistleblower does not have protection. He does not meet the elements necessary for protection. And of course, everybody's out there screaming, you can't name him, you can't name him. Too late, the name's out. Kanye West is out there saying black power is not just to vote Democratic for the rest of our lives. Well, he's hit that one on the head. But the Democrats are shifting away from dependence on the black vote to the illegal immigrant vote. And again, that was another thing that Trump had 3.5 years to deal with, and it hasn't been dealt with. We get a lot of press releases. We get video of, portions of a fence being built. That's it. We're not seeing an end result. The government has reached the point where they're trying to basically sustain their image and their leadership on the basis of press releases, rather than getting anything actually accomplished. Apparently over on The View, they were talking about Roman Polanski. Now, if you're young, you probably don't recognize the name. Very famous film director, and he got into trouble because he was having sex with an underage girl. And rather than face trial, he basically exiled himself to Europe, where he's continued to make films. But there's been a big hue and cry in Hollywood about it's time to bring Roman Polanski home. And Whoopi Goldberg apparently went on the record saying that what Polanski did wasn't rape. Well, Whoopi, even if consensual, sex with an underage girl is legally defined as statutory rape. And he broke that law. Now, somebody wants to issue a pardon or a sentence commutation. That's one thing. But this idea that it wasn't rape, it's just silly. It just really is silly. Representative Jordan is moving over to the Intelligence Committee. I don't know what effect that's going to have here. Story coming out of Investment Watch blog. The food system is collapsing actively and rapidly. Urgent warning, Australia has dried out. There are no crops. And we had a video that we put up at whatreallyhappened.com earlier today about how difficult it is to try and harvest crops like corn in the snow. So again, stock up. Don't waste any food. It's going to be a while getting through to next year's first harvest. All right, they're still digging at the history of Ghislaine Maxwell, Robert Maxwell's daughter, and Jeffrey Epstein's, pimp, for lack of a better word. Apparently she's now down in Brazil Oh, they want that story to go away. Want that story to go away. Okay, YouTube has banned a doctor's warning about gender transitioning, calling it hate speech. Apparently, according to YouTube, if you question gender transitioning in young people, it's hate speech. Like I said, once you're an adult, if you want to make that choice, fine. Don't sell it to young people. And by the way, big secret being kept is how many people have transitioned to the other gender, and they get over there and realize it didn't really solve any of their life problems, and now they're transitioning back. And regretting the fact that because of what they did, they're unable to have children. We already talked about the Texas case here. Apparently, Glenn Greenwald was doing a live broadcast and was assaulted on air by pro-Bolsonaro supporters. They're getting violent out there. All righty. Let's see. Oh, we're coming up here on a commercial break. And when we come on back, we're just going to be going through the headlines again and looking for more stories. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We have a caller on the line, Captain Jack in Florida. And aloha, Captain Jack. What's up?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Good to hear your voice again. I've been off there for a while. Mike, I just got done listening to Dave Hodges over on another channel there, and he has come up with a deal about Calexis, where they're wanting to separate from the United States.
Yes.
He said there's 9 people that got killed down there was part of the deal there. They threatened on his show a while back to start killing white people and Christians, and him and Paul Preston have come up with, they think that might be part of it. You heard anything about it?
No, I haven't heard anything about it. Now, who was it who was threatening to kill white people?
The gangs down in Mexico that are in favor of that Calexit, where they're wanting to separate from the United States.
Okay.
So you might listen to Dave over there. And by the way, I'm glad all your stuff made it over to the mainland, because some of those container ships have a lot of problems.
Well, we didn't get everything over here intact, unfortunately, but the damage was rather minimal. And, as long as the computers spun up, I'm kind of happy. But other things like the remote to our Blu-ray player, we still haven't found that one yet. But again, this weekend is dedicated to getting Claire's office finished, getting my office finished, and we tried to reach a neighbor boy to help me get this done, but so far, no joy.
Oh, well, good. I'm glad you did get most everything over there, because they're always having one of them going over the side or burning up or something going on in these ships. But anyway, you're in a good place there. I used to run in the Ohio River. If you're near Evansville, take a look at that big bend there. You can look across it and see the boat you're going to miss. You're going to pass. Coming down one side, he's coming down the other. You can look clear across that piece of land there in Evansville.
Okay, I'm trying to picture it in my mind here. I mean, we went down to...
It's a big view.
Okay.
Yeah, it's something to see. Yeah, I like the Ohio River. It's good over there in Indiana. Well, anyway, I'll let you go, Mike. I don't have much to talk about. I just wanted to let you know you might get on Dave Hodges' channel there and take a listen to that.
All right. Well, I'll definitely take a look at that. I'm just trying to figure out why the drug cartels would want to start killing white people. I mean, that's who they're selling their drugs to for the most part. And
well, that was part of the Calexit deal. I don't understand the whole deal, but he's got it all played out there. So I don't know whether he's right or not, but you could probably sort it out better than I could.
Well, it's always a matter of interpretation, because that western part of the United States, including California, was basically surrendered by General Santa Anna following the Alamo. And the position of the Mexicans is that Santa Anna didn't actually have the authority to give all that land away. Therefore, it is still technically part of Mexico. And that is why they feel justified in moving on in, speaking Spanish, and bringing back the Spanish culture to Southern California.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder what the military is going to do out there. I was stationed out in San Diego for a while in the Navy, and the place is just it's full of Navy, Marines, and Army, and Air Force, and everything else out there.
No question, it's a big military town, along with all the tourist attractions and everything, and the current owners of all of that aren't going to want to let it go without a fight. The people who are pushing for Hawaii's independence are facing the same issue because everyone's saying, well, we've got all these military bases there, we got Pearl Harbor, what are we going to do with that?
Yeah, that's right. Okay, Mike, well, look, I'll let you go. Listen to you for a while. Good hearing you.
Okay.
Hey, bye.
All right, bye-bye. Okay, the phone lines are open again, 800-313-9443. And apparently the New York Federal Reserve has disclosed that the repo madness is now hitting $190 billion a day. Baby. And again, a lot of this is being driven by the fact that banks are slowing down their lending to each other. Now, the stock market did end in the green, but just barely. And the corporate media is out there saying, it's a new high record, look how, when they start treating investment data like it's a sports score, that's a red warning sign to me. So, Daniel Park is out there saying, is it time to ban share buybacks again? Well, I think so, but, they're really in a corner on all of this stuff. There is no solution other than to simply blanket forgive all the debt, have a modern-day jubilee. Money junkies will never let that happen. All right, we're going to take another break here for some commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, NBC News went on out with the classic man on the street interview, camera talking to passersby, and I'm sure they tried to load it up with shills, but they were asking about impeachment, and overwhelmingly the people are just saying, no, this has gone on far enough. And it's because even people who don't like Trump are realizing there's no there. I mean, Adam Schiff keeps stumbling over his own feet now, and they're going to have the first open hearings next week, and already Schiff is trying to narrow the scope of GOP questions. He's turning it into a star chamber, into a kangaroo court. So, all right. Apparently there was a bill before Congress for money to revive our national parks, which, like so much else in our society, have been allowed to deteriorate because the money is being spent on war, on Israel, on illegal immigrants, on refugees. And I'm one of those people who grew up with a great deal of pride in our national parks. I've been to pretty much all of them at one point or another. I went out to Grand Canyon before they put up all the safety rails and glass and everything. Back when you really felt you were connected to nature and you could walk along that rim, and if you fell off and died, it was your own stupid fault. But apparently Congress is saying, no, we need the money for other things here. We need the money for other things here. So Elon Musk is out there saying that building the first sustainable city on Mars will take 1,000 starships and 20 years. Well, maybe. And being a big science buff, science fiction buff, if you will. It's exciting to think about. But I really do think that we have to take care of this planet first, or we're just going to export to Mars the same political corruptions that we have here. I think our entire global political system needs a makeover. And it needs to be refocused on taking care of the people whose labor produces the wealth that government spends. Now, there's this story from years ago about Davy Crockett when he was in Congress. And he was coming up for re-election and was walking around his district and talking to people. And they all loved him. They knew his name. He was famous. He had name value. And he was asking this one farmer was going to vote for him. And the farmer said, no. And it all had to do with the fact that Congress had passed a bill allocating money for the widow of a soldier who had died in duty to the country. And the farmer's logic was simply this: if members of Congress wanted to dip into their own pockets to help out this lady, he would applaud them. But Congress was spending money that didn't really belong to them. It belonged to the people and was supposed to be spent to support the American people. Of course, we have gone so far away from that, where government is constantly taking money from us. They're violating that part of the Constitution that forbids direct, non-apportioned taxation. And they're just looting the country for money, and they're spending it on their pet projects, on Israel, on the wars. And we're being plundered bit by bit by bit by bit. Okay, now getting on back to that fired CBS News employee, Ashley Bianco, they're saying this is the tip of what could be a bona fide media mega scandal. Of course, the corporate media won't cover it. They're protect each other's backsides here. But here in the independent media, yeah, we're going to keep an eye on this. And we're going to really just start pounding on the idea you can't trust what's in the corporate media. And you certainly can't let them tell you what to think. You have to make that decision for yourself. Apparently, Iran has shot down yet another foreign drone conducting surveillance over its southern port city of Mashhad. Rented lips. So, gee, I wonder whose drone that could be. Apparently, up in New York, a police officer has been arrested on duty by federal agents with assault weapons. Apparently, this police officer, along with 26 others, was involved in an $18 million insurance fraud operation. And the others being arrested included 9/11 dispatchers and nurses. We're losing our civilization. We're losing our society. Anyway. Okay. Jane Fonda says the iconic red coat she was arrested in is the last piece of clothing she will ever buy, as she vows to quit shopping to fight consumerism in move inspired by Greta Thunberg. Well, Jane, if you run out of clothes today, you don't look like you did back in Barbarella. Let's be honest about that one here. Children's chain Mamas and Papas collapses into administration, meaning bankruptcy, closes 6 stores, 73 staff have been let go just days after Mother Care went bust. So you can't claim to have this incredible economy going on when all these retailers are going out of business, especially this being the start of the so-called holiday shopping season. This is when it's all supposed to be ramping up, and instead we're seeing the opposite. Alrighty. Legacy media continues to titillate its fans with impeachment. There's no there there. You know, it's based on one guy's impression of hearing one side of a phone call that Trump made to the president of Ukraine. It's all rumor, innuendo, and hearsay. They don't have anything on Trump. And again, I'm very disappointed in Trump. I backed him in 2016, mostly because I didn't want Hillary in that White House. But he's been a disappointment. I think he's a poor president. I think he's going to go down in history as being marginally above Millard Fillmore in terms of the quality job that he's doing. But I support the republic that this nation is supposed to be, founded on a constitution. We're supposed to live under the rule of law, not the whim of the ultra-rich and ultra-powerful. Mr. Soros. Anyway. Apparently, Attorney General William Barr has announced this pre-crime program. And I'll bet you thought that that was just a science fiction movie there, starring Tom Cruise. But apparently, they're out there. Barr has issued a memorandum to all U.S. attorneys, law enforcement agencies, and top-ranking Justice Department officials announcing the imminent implementation of a new National Disruption and Early Engagement program aimed at detecting potential mass shooters before they commit any crime. Well, step one on that is, are they on prescription antidepressants? So it's just another excuse to spy on us all, make sure we're not saying double plus ungood things, the radio, social media. But again, how do you identify the real shooters? Because a lot of people like to talk tough. You know, around here, everybody's got guns. Indiana's real gun friendly. That's why we don't have mass shootings in Indiana. And it's almost become a joke here. The government has become completely ineffective. So if they can't fix something, they'll just say, well, we must do something and we'll pass another law. Immigration is a good example of that. All of this stuff that's going on, the crossing of the borders, the sanctuary cities, and the rest of it, is already illegal under existing law that is simply not being enforced. The politicians don't want you to think that they're just oblivious to the problem or they're encouraging the problem. So yes, we're going to pass another law. So William Barr is out there saying, we're going to have this pre-crime program. We're going to stop the mass shootings by spying on everybody that's got a gun and make sure they're not talking about shooting people. And unfortunately, some gun owners who are rather irresponsible, they're not pulling the trigger on other people, but they talk about it. I want to take my gun and go shoot that SOB tax collector or something like that. And it's just talk. And even more important, it's protected under the First Amendment. And Barr needs to address the issue, or he needs to understand that we are looking at the issue that many of these mass shootings seem to be staged events to support the gun grab agenda. And if you look at how hard they're pushing for the gun grab, they must really be afraid of us right now. And I can imagine with all the riots and protests around the world, some of which are now turning violent, like we saw down in Bolivia, the federal government is very concerned. The American people have reached the breaking point, and they're ready to stand up and start shooting. I'd like to avoid that. In fact, a big part of what has motivated me over the since 1994, is the desire to not let this country descend into anarchy, revolution, and civil war. But at this point, I'm ready to concede I may have wasted all that time. I may have completely wasted all of that time. Okay, let's see here. Little ongoing email debate with somebody over the Knights Templar and how they were actually Jews as well. And as I said to that one caller early on, don't get so focused on saying the Jews this and the Jews that, that you fail to realize there are other people who are not Jewish who are part of the problems that we're dealing with. Oh, anyway. What's going on over at NASA? Well, there's not much at all here. Okay. All right. So coming up on the end of the show on this Pauhana Friday, it's very frustrating right now to be looking at what's going on in this country and in this government. It does feel like a clown circus at times, or romper room. And you look at these members of Congress who are supposed to represent the best amongst us, and instead it seems like we voted for the worst amongst us, indeed the most childish. And that tells me the system is broken, that we're not getting the representation that we deserve. Corporate media and the government are all about maintaining their power and control and convincing you that everything is just really, really wonderful, even as we descend into third world status, which we clearly are. Look at the deteriorated roads, the rails. Apparently there's yet another dam out in Southern California that engineers are saying will not survive a heavy rain. If we get a lot of snow this winter, which looks to be the case, when it comes to the spring melt, there's going to be more floods. So where was the money to bolster the dams and make sure they're reinforced against the higher waters? Well, we're sorry. We had to choose between saving the American people in that floodplain area or buying more bombs and bullets. And unfortunately, the priority right now is bombs and bullets. And the real tragedy of it is, I know that in previous major wars, like World War I and World War II, the American people, non-combatants, not in the military directly, sacrificed a great deal. They endured tremendous hardships because they believed the wars were moral and just and necessary. And our government is pushing on Russia and China right now without that justification. Without that support. The American people don't want any more wars. We've been at war now for what, going on 19 years? If you count Afghanistan. Longer than that if you count the fact that technically the war with North Korea is still on. And as that one commercial tends to say, yeah, we're being lied to all the time. We're the most lied to people on the face of planet Earth. And I'm sick and tired of it. I'm sure that you're sick and tired of it. I want a truthful government. And if I can't get a truthful government, I want no government at all. And yes, that sounds like being an anarchist. But right now, being an anarchist is looking very attractive compared to what we have now, which is Republicans and Democrats just batting us back and forth like ping pong balls, trying to gain an advantage in a game that has absolutely no meaning or benefit for ordinary American citizens. As I said earlier in the week on one of these phone calls going into this next election, forget about the rhetoric, forget about screams about Russian agents, forget about the rest of that. Take a look at your own personal life, you and your family, and say, are we better off today than we were in 2016? Do I have a higher paying job? Do we have a higher standard of living? Next year is going to be a year when voting your wallet really makes the best sense. Fortunately, with all the candidates lying about what they're going to do, that's going to be difficult. Although in the case of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, we already know she's bad for the wallet with her Green New Deal. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with the last segment of our show after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our show on this Pauhana Friday here. We're going to go to the phones here to Mark in New York. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Thanks for taking my call. I wanted to call in and talk about something I've read in this book called Influence. And they opened up the chapter about reciprocity. And they were talking about, the author mentioned some things about favors, handing out favors. The chapter actually begins with a professor sending out Christmas postcards to strangers and how many responses he got back. Very impressed with that. But also they talked about politicians receiving money from corporations. Yeah. But I found it interesting that it's a societal thing where when you give something to somebody, they feel obliged to give something back.
Yes.
And I just find it interesting that maybe there's some parallels politically with like what Trump was doing and this idea of quid pro quo getting passed back and forth when he actually didn't give this new Ukrainian president anything particular. He might have been better off just giving him something and just mentioning in passing maybe that they can help him out, look into some corruption. What they were talking about in the chapter was Carter had a hard time because he was an outsider. He didn't have much influence, but Lyndon B. Johnson before him, they were impressed how fast he was able to get things implemented because he cashed in a lot of favors. Even mentioned Hare Krishnas were having a tough time making money, but once they started handing out a flower, they were able to get money, even though, the people were just tossing away the flowers. They'd go and recollect them and hand them out again. Also, sorts of funny stories like that. But also in societies, it was able to help people become experts in certain things in the community. So that was my idea.
Well, first of all, when the U.S. government hands out foreign aid to a foreign government, there are always strings attached. There's always a quid pro quo. I think a good illustration of that would be this friction with Turkey over the fact that Turkey wanted to drop the purchase of the Patriot missile in favor of the Russian S-400. And there was all this talk about sanctions and cutting of foreign aid and everything. So the idea that Trump would put conditions on aid to Ukraine, that's business as usual. There's nothing really unusual about that at all. Exactly what that quid pro quo was is where they're trying to focus all the attention. And again, they don't have anything at all to say that, yes, he was after Biden specifically. In fact, what we're hearing from Ukraine was that they were the ones saying, you got to look into what the Bidens are doing. Because they're making huge amounts of money. And now we're finding out that other of these Get Trump players were involved in this. They were all dipping in. And it's just one big, giant, corrupted gang. But Trump's not in it, which is why they're trying so hard to get him.
Yeah, he is an outsider. But to me, it's almost natural. It seems like they're making it like it's a sin or something. The quid pro quo.
Yeah, well, that's the job of the corporate media, is to make you think it's a sin and it's something unusual and wrong. Anyway, there's the music. It's time for us to go. All right. So thank you for the phone call, Mark. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please spread the word of RBN. Please spread the word of whatreallyhappened.com. Please support us. We do appreciate it. Thanks to everybody who has sent in money already. And we'll be back on Monday. Have a good weekend. Aloha, America.